Rob Crawford was born in 1965 and grew up in a Christadelphian home, was married and raised two children who are both married themselves. He has a 2.5-year-old grandson, Archer, who he assures me is absolutely adorable. 2 years ago, Rob was about to spend Australia Day long weekend with some friends when Rob had an accident. He was lucky to survive. In fact, some would say it was a miracle he survived. Rob speaks with Wilderness Conversations today. Rob, how does a builder with 30 years' experience fall off a ladder? What happened?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple, Steve. It's over familiarity. You should always have, when you're on a ladder, you should always have 3 points of contact. So you've got your feet on the ladder, you're firmly grasped onto the building or the ladder, and then you have one hand free to do whatever you need to do on the roof. And I was screwing off a barge cap, and it was we bought this property at Araring. We had built the shed, and we'd moved into the shed. That we'd got some accommodation in the front of the shed, and then I was just putting the barge caps on, and I was saying to James Darley, who works with me, I said, we'll get these barge caps on, then that's done, we can get onto the house. And
it was the long weekend, right? It was like the Friday before the long weekend.
The Thursday before the long weekend. Right. Yeah, it's 2 years. I was stretching out with my screw gun to put screws into this barge cap. James was down the other end of the barge cap on the lower section, and I overstretched, which is actually all right because I still have my 3 points of contact. My screw gun slipped, and the screw went flying off, as it does, because you're not in a good position to put the screw in. So I thought, I'll fix this. I let go of my 3rd point of contact, put it on the screw gun, put all my pressure on it, and it slipped again. My hands were in the air, and I was leaning too far across, and I just couldn't believe it. Like, how could this happen to me? And I'm in the air, and and fell.
Tell me about being in the air. Did you literally have that thought while you're in the air?
Oh dear. Yeah,
You had time to think.
Yeah, time to think.
How high were you?
My feet were 3.6 meters off the ground. So my body and torso was up around like 5 meters. I fell. Now, what happened is I fell, and I actually did a 180-degree spin. So imagine you're facing the shed when you're leaning on the ladder. I fall off to the left. I actually spin around, and my back is facing the shed now, and my feet land on a concrete path, and my body sprawls out over this gravel area. And I think that saved my life, because if I'd fallen straight down facing the shed, I would have just crunched into the concrete and into the wall of the shed, because my head hit the gravel. If I hadn't spun around, my head would have hit the concrete. And that would have been a very different story.
Do you feel like you did that yourself deliberately at the time of falling, or do you think it was some other mechanism happening at the time, some other instinct?
No comment, Steve.
Right.
No, it amazes me. That saved my life. Was it an angel? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I have no recollection of doing it at all. And I didn't realize it. So it wasn't Rob, do this amazing gymnastics maneuver and that's going to save your life. No, I can't attribute it to that. I just don't know. I just feel very blessed.
Do you remember the moment when you hit the ground?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. I was not feeling blessed. I was feeling really angry. Like I was so angry with myself.
So you were angry with yourself rather than just sort of writhing in pain. How does the pain and anger, how did that all work together?
So it was the 24th of January. It was really hot. I'd fallen onto concrete and gravel. James was amazing. He was up the other ladder, and he was calling triple O before he hit the ground, before he got off his ladder, and he came racing over to me, and and I said, James, can you just get me out of the heat? Now that was probably a mistake because I could have had spinal injuries, but it was just so hot on that gravel, and I got him to drag me inside. There was people working next door on the adjacent property, and James yelled out to those guys, and they jumped over the fence and they carried me inside. I just remember being so hot and so angry at the stupid mistake that I'd made.
Did you have a sense at that time that you'd really damaged yourself?
Yeah. When you look down, my bone was sticking out of my right leg. Yeah, so it was a compound fracture. My left foot, I had boots on, so my left foot felt a little bit funny. But when I took my boot off, there was a little bruise on the top of my foot. And I thought, oh, something's going on there. That feels a bit funny. It was a little bit swollen, but that's where all the damage was. There was 4 broken bones in that left foot. And my wrist felt a bit odd, and that was broken as well. So I had one useful limb. And I had a hematoma on my head and a graze where I hit the gravel. That settled down in a week or week and a half. The gravel rush the hematoma went down in a few hours, which was another blessing. And then when I got to hospital, they were amazed that I didn't have internal injuries.
Do you remember the ambulance coming? And how did that work?
Yeah, the ambulance was there and the police turned up. And they were there so fast. They got there in like 10 to 15 minutes. And
remembering, you're in sort of an urban area. It's not a metro area.
It's a little bit rural, but Araring is like about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from Toronto, and about 10 minutes from Morisset. So it was very fortunate that they weren't too far away.
And when the ambulance arrived, they collected you up and put you on a stretcher and took you off, or did they do some work on you while you were there?
No, they did a little bit of work. They made sure everything was okay. I think they probably would have been shocked that I was moved, but I was pretty insistent that I got moved.
Your injuries were serious, and I remember I had the opportunity with a few other people to visit you on Tuesday after the long weekend. I still remember this day quite well, actually. And you'd had some operations, or at least one operation, if I remember correctly. The next day, or in the next 2 days, you were going back into surgery to have your ankle reconstructed. It was badly
foot.
Broken.
Yes.
Your foot, yes.
Yeah.
I think the doctors at the time told you that they weren't sure what they were going to be able to do, if anything. So it was obviously very seriously damaged, and so that was yet to be seen. But one of the amazing things I remember was just how positive you were at the time. And in fact, dare I say it, I thought in some ways too positive. And I actually remember commenting with somebody in the car park as we were leaving saying, it's what's with Rob? It's either it hasn't sunk in or it's the drugs or something else like that. Do you remember what it was like those few days after the accident, and why were you so positive on that day?
Well, I always like to think I'm a positive type of person and take things on the chin. I was about to embark on a journey that I had no idea where it was going to lead me, and that was, I was unaware. A lot had to sink in. And and the healing process, and it's 2 years now, And I've today went to the surgeon, I thought for the last time, but he wants to see me again in another 6 months. But been really great healing, but it's been a long road.
I was interested in your thoughts around, I remember at the time being quite apprehensive about visiting you in hospital. Wanted to do it, as you would, but what do you say? It's difficult to say. Now, I'm sure you had lots of people say lots of different things to you. Do you have any advice for people that are going to see someone in that situation? What can you say to someone that's been injured so seriously but alive? What sort of things did you find helpful, and perhaps what sort of things were not so helpful?
Look, I don't remember. I guess I don't remember the bad things, but like I just loved having. I had some of the very best conversations with people around my bedside that I've ever had. That was one of the most positive things. Like, I had so many visitors, so many well wishers. I got a lemon tree delivered to hospital. Okay, a negative. Gary Hindmarsh, he brought in a ladder.
Nice.
Nice touch, Gaz. Just as a bit of a joke, but there is not a prescriptive word or thing to say when you go and visit somebody in that situation. The fact that you're there is really nice. I've heard people say when they've been in a trauma situation that somebody came to visit them, they didn't even really want that person to visit them because they were going through a pretty hard time. It wasn't a physical, it was emotional trauma that they were going through, same thing. And they just sat there with them. And then they said, can I make you a cup of coffee? People sidling up beside you and they're wanting to feel what you're going through and be there for you. That's enough. Yep, you're going to say the wrong thing, but you're there having a go, and I would not dissuade any. I can't point the finger at anything. One amazing thing that happened when I was in John Hunter is a fella came in and he was a Seventh-day Adventist. It was just after the New Start week, because we had a lot to do with the centre running New Start for the week, and lovely people. And he came in on the Saturday and visited us to visit me, and we had a chat about how it all happened. And he said, "Do you mind if I pray with you, Rob?" And I thought, that was a nice thing. I don't think we do that enough. They're just instant in prayer. His belief structure, very different than mine, but he is instant in prayer. Okay, so if you ask after advice, I think we would do well to learn to do that. I find it uncomfortable myself, and that's my issue. I need to deal with that. Yeah, but that was really comforting. Yeah.
That's very interesting. You spent a couple of weeks, I don't know exactly how long, in John Hunter Hospital, and then you moved to the Toronto Hospital, which was essentially for your rehab.
Yeah, 2 weeks in John Hunter, 2 weeks in Toronto. Yeah.
Right, okay. I remember visiting you in Toronto, and one of the things I noticed was you were very different in Toronto.
Yeah.
The positive Rob, almost laughing Rob, was far more serious.
Mm.
Do you remember that change happening?
Yeah. It was nearly a pivot point. So I was lying in bed. I didn't have a lot of pain. When you say, when I fell off the roof, how did I feel? The pain wasn't immense. I kept telling the doctors and everybody that I didn't have enormous pain. I had pressure. I had pressure in my lower limbs, like enormous pressure. and that pressure started to filter up into my whole body, and I think they call that anxiety. But I didn't have the acute pain. So your question is, when did the change happen from happy Rob to, my goodness, what's happened? And that was the day I left John Hunter Hospital. The physio, I'd been in there for 2 weeks, and they said, and you're lying in your bed. I wasn't in an enormous amount of pain. I got moved out of my private room, and I was in a ward with 3 other people, and we actually mucked around and had quite a bit of fun. And but I didn't have to deal with my injuries. Right. Then on the last day of being at John Hunter, the physios come in and they said, "We want you to stand up." Right, okay.
So this would have been the first time.
First time in 2 weeks. So I stood up, and it took all of my energy just to stand up.
Mental energy or physical energy?
Everything. Yeah, like I stood up on these crutches. I think they might have had a full frame for me. So I'm holding all my weight on my arms on this frame, and I just burst into tears. And I got the head doctor over, and I said, "What is wrong with me?" And he said, "Rob, you've been in bed for 2 weeks. You've not known what the outcome is, and this is the outcome, and it's actually good." He said, "But you've stood up, and you've realised that's all you can do, and it's taken all of your energy just to stand up." And I'm a physical sort of fella. Like we're into the farming, we're into the building, we're active all the time, and that hit me. If you ask for a mark in the sand, I reckon that's it.
Did you have a sense of the time frame that it would take you to recover at that point in time? How long were you thinking that you were going to be before you were running
3
about
months.
the place? Yep.
Yeah, 3 months, and I'll be running around.
Yeah.
And we're 2 years down the track, but look, I've just started running again, and at the gym on a treadmill. It's like you have to massage this situation for the rest of your life and manage it. But I'm not dead, Steve, so I've got to keep telling myself that, and that's a good thing.
Rob, one of the consequences of an injury like that is the result on your work. You work for yourself, so that's a serious consequence. So you're unable to work. You're unable to provide an income that you've been used to doing for all of your married life. Did that affect you?
Oh, yeah, majorly. So it was, I've always had workers' compensation policy for if this ever happened. And I actually didn't want to use it because I thought, they're not going to pay out because it was my own stupid fault that this happened. And somebody said to me, they said, "Rob, it's an accident." And
did you almost feel like you were unworthy of being paid because it was your?
Yeah, because it was my fault. And they said, "This is what workers' compensation is for, is because it's an accident. And you've worked for 35 years and you've never had to call on it, and now it's time to call on it." So that was helpful, and they were really good. They give you a small wage to keep going, but they pay for all your rehab, your physio, your gym membership, and your transport. So they were actually fantastic. But the emotional weight of letting the family down, it was big, because we just moved on to a 3-acre block of land at Araring. We were living in a shed, which is actually another blessing, because we'd moved from Fishing Point and there were stairs everywhere. I was in a wheelchair, and this is all on one level. And so James built me a lovely little ramp to get in and out of the house. And then I'd be in a wheelchair and on crutches, and got a mobility scooter. So that does a lot for your self-esteem when you're our age. But that was very helpful. I was very thankful for it. You know, showering yourself, going to the toilet, like everything. Your dignity is just gone, Steve. You are at the beck and call of everybody. When you fall off the roof and you're head of a family, a father figure, you got wife, kids, grandkids, and you feel the weight of disappointment that you have caused because of your mistake, and that ended up playing that was a big issue for me. So it's not just you that falls off the ladder. So we were in the shed, just about ready. So you have all these plans, all your expectations. We were going to go up to Nelson Bay with you that weekend. That didn't happen. The anticipation of building the house. How is that going to happen? God willing, thankfully, God be thanked, it did happen. And I was able to coordinate all my trades and everything, and everything progressed. And in 12 months' time, we were ready to move in. So that was a real blessing. But for Leah, like she's there, she's here in a shed on 3 acres. I'm in hospital. She's going, I've got to get this house built. And she's a doer. She's a manager. And the poor thing, she's racing around the property. I've got to pick up all of these sticks. The place is looking a mess. And then she picks them all up and she gets this pile of sticks together, and she goes to start burn them in the middle of summer. She goes over to the neighbour and she said, Murray, is it all right if I have a fire? And he goes, Leah, no, we're in the middle of summer. To which she bursts into tears. And he said, Leah, what can I do to help? And she said, I just want my lawns mowed, and so he jumped up, he mowed all our lawns. He was amazing. But these are the things that the ripple effect of you falling off and an accident, whether it's a car accident, whether it's a mental health issue, whether it's illness, whether it's some debilitating thing that happens to you, the village suffers. And we have a wonderful village, Steve. We really do.
Was that one of the things that came out for you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we had, people racing around everywhere, our laundry wasn't hooked up, Nick Galbraith to come over and say, I've got to do something. Just give me something to do. And there's so many people just give me something to do. And that was amazing. And that's another thing we're not great at doing, accepting help. And, because we become very self-sufficient in this Western society that we're brought up in. Yeah, and that's very humbling as well.
You weren't running around after 3 months. In fact, it was a lot longer before you were running around.
Yeah.
How did that go for you? Tell us about sort of that next 12 months or so. How did you go mentally, physically? What was that like?
Okay, so 2 weeks in John Hunter, 2 weeks in Toronto Private in the rehab section. And I remember being in they'd get me into the gym section, and they would get me to walk around the gym on a frame. And the first time it took all my energy to do one lap, which was about 20 meters, and then sit down. And I was just physically exhausted. So I would practice that, and I would push myself as hard as I could to get as good as I could get. And then, okay, so that was the one barrier, one mountain to climb. Then and you look forward in anticipation to coming home. Everything's set up at home. We've got the ramp put in that James built for us, and you get home in your wheelchair, and you're at home. You've got to use special implements to do everything, and you're totally dependent upon people to come and go and look after you. That was tough, and it was tough on Leah as well. And then you have this whole interaction where does she really understand what I'm going through? And then she would be going, does Rob really understand what I'm going through? I think that she needed to keep busy as her coping mechanism. We had to negotiate the home space. We were in a small area, in a little one-bedroom flat that we built in the front of our shed, and and that was a battle. And okay, so then when I'm at home, I work cover would workers' comp would pay for a taxi to come and pick me up, take me back to Toronto Private 3 times a week, and you'd go through the motions of all these exercises to try and build your legs up and your hands and every aspect, and you get in the pool and do your physio. And I said to one of the physiotherapists, I'm going, why am I feeling so down? Like I'm just, I'm a happy person. I really don't like being unhappy. And one of them just said, oh, you might need to go and see your GP. I go, what does that even mean? Go and see your GP. What can the GP do to fix me being sad? That's how much I knew about mental health back then. And then so I just ignored that. And then there was another lady, physiotherapist, and I said, I'm just feeling really down. And she got it straight away. She said, Rob, you've done 24 sessions of physiotherapy here. She said, you've done absolutely nothing for your mental health. And I said, well, why would I? All the damage is in my limbs. It's not in my head. She just smiled. She said, Rob, I've been there. And she said, with her job, she sees so much trauma, and she said she needs to get some help. She said, go to your doctor, get a referral to go and see a psychologist. And I thought, really? And she said, yes, and go and see these people. And she gave me a card. And so she was very direct. And
so that was you had not thought of that. That was news for you.
Who needs a psychologist, Steve? Yeah. And so I went to the doctor, and you get your 5 sessions that are subsidized, and you go to I went and saw this psychologist in Newcastle, and she didn't have a silver bullet fix for this issue. But it was very interesting how she hovered around the issue, and she allowed me to do the talking. And I thought, why don't you just tell me what I need to do to fix it? And she said, oh, well, I can't. You have to. And one thing that was interesting that she said is she said, Rob, what is something good that has come out of here at this accident? And I thought, there's nothing good. I was in a space where it's actually I was on crutches. I was getting around the building site now, and then you think that would be a blessing, and it is a blessing. But you're seeing all the other carpenters and trades running twice as fast as you, past you, just walking. You're actually in the way, and you're better off if you're not there. So I had this little story going on in my mind saying, you're useless, Rob. I had this pre-recording.
Was it subconscious, or were you literally saying that to yourself?
I was literally saying that to myself. Yeah. That played on my mind. I'm useless. And I would play this recording. You know, you're no longer helpful. It's better off if you're actually not on site, and these guys are leaving you for dead. So you actually, it's gone from you just having an accident to you losing your identity. See, I had an identity as a builder, and that's who I was known of, and that people could call on me when they needed help, and I'd be there to help out with situations. That had been just taken away from me. I was the one looking out for help, and I had this track playing in my head that, Rob, you're useless, you're good for nothing. And this psychologist said, she said, when are you going to ease up on yourself? And I said, pardon? She said, when are you going to give yourself a break? She said, Rob, you had an accident. She said, you've been doing it for 35 years. Yep, you're overconfident and you took it for granted and you've had an accident. She said, you are not a useless builder. You are a builder that is recovering from a major trauma. And you're not dead. And this is just obvious stuff. But it's amazing. The track you play in your head is what you become. And whether you've got a trauma or not, if we play this negative track, no matter who we are, no matter what circumstances we're in, we will become that track. And that it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And she said, you're a builder that is recovering from a major trauma, and you are going to get better. And she said, you've got to start tell me one thing that is good that has come out of this accident. And I'm going, there's nothing. I thought to myself, there's nothing. And I thought, okay, dig deep. And one thing that is being major for me is my empathy level for people going through a myriad of things. Doesn't have to be an accident, doesn't have to be an illness, can be somebody with a long face. Somebody, and I pick it now. I can really, my sensitivity towards that is really heightened. One shop that I particularly went into after my trauma, it was a mower shop, and the guy would be so negative and whinge about the world situation, his situation, and it gave me license to say, have you ever thought about having a chat with somebody? Because I needed to. And he goes, really? I said, yeah. I said, what I'm hearing from you is a lot of negativity. And I said, that's not helpful. Are you okay? And it really took him back, but he didn't take offense because I'd been through it. So that was so that's one of the blessings that I found that the psychiatrist asked me to look for. And it's still with me today. If I see somebody that's down in the dumps, you go, you all right? And I mean it now.
Right.
And I think you have to feel pain before you can really empathize with people. Yeah, speaking your blessings out loud. And so she said, don't stop your negative talk. Leah was telling me, she said, stop saying you're no good. And but that was just Leah saying. And I should have listened to her. But this is a real physical attribute that is attributed to your mental health. It affects every aspect of your body. You can will yourself to death. I believe that now. If you believe you're sick, you will be sick. And if you believe you're useless, you'll be useless. Now, start saying your blessings out loud. Once I had that fixed into my mind, that was another turning point. You said, when did it change from happy Rob to very melancholy Rob? That was in John Hunter. And the next turning point to get out of the hole was seeing the psychologist. She couldn't fix it, like a chiropractor can't fix your back, but he can tune your body so your body fixes itself.
Right.
The psychologist just gave you the tools to start using, and you have the choice whether you start speaking positivity back into your life or not. And
do you reckon there was a difference? So there was a difference when you started doing that?
Light and day. Yeah. And then when you start to get that in your mind, you go to the scriptures and you see that I've always been a fan of the book of the Philippians, a letter to the Philippians, and that is a mental health book. I tell you, it is. But, we're talking about my mere little injuries. Well, they're pretty major, but your attitude towards them, Paul and Silas, whipped and beaten unjustly, thrown into the deepest, darkest part of the jail. What do? They start singing hymns and praising God. And Paul is so overwhelmed that God counted him worthy to suffer like Christ. That was his attitude. And when the Philippian jailer, when the earthquake happens at midnight, all their chains fall off. The prisoners don't run away. They don't run away. The jailer calls for a light, and he's ready to fall on his sword. Paul could have just said nothing. He said, if you want to do yourself in, go for your life. He says, stop, for we are all here. That's one of the greatest mental health sections of scripture that's just jumped out at me. Stop, don't harm yourself, because we are all here. And that's what I found with our group in Christadelphia. Rob, are you okay? Because we're all here. And we don't hear that. We're here for each other in so many ways, and we just take that for granted. And the mental health thing, it's so hard to understand. I had friends come and sit and look at the beautiful view that we have, and he said, how can you be down in the dumps, Rob? And it doesn't make any sense. There's no view in the world is going to take away how you're feeling. You have to shift the dynamic between your ears. And scripture is full of it. Philippians chapter 4, I've got it here, it's better than me quoting it. It says, verse 8 of chapter 4, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. And taking another step, like Deuteronomy says in the law, say them out loud. So I started saying my blessings out loud. And my goodness, turn around. But you can slip back so quickly into the mindset of I've been hard done by so quickly. It's human nature.
Still?
We have to, this is a constant battle. Like Paul says, the good work that I would, I find not, but the evil that I would not, that I find that I do. It is constantly there. And when I started reading Christ's contest in the wilderness, the wilderness test, I call it, I related so much to that, because it starts in chapter 3 of Matthew, and Jesus is baptized, and the Spirit descends on him in the form of a dove, and God says, "This is my Son, whom I am well pleased. Hear him." And then the Father takes him, leads him into the desert for 40 days with no food and no water. And then it says the devil comes to him and he says, "If you are the Son of God, turn these stones into bread." And the emphasis is, if you are the Son of God, are you who you say you are? And that was the exact battle that I was going through. And you, Rob, you say that you're a builder, but you can't even walk around the building site. And so you have to, and Jesus turned it right around, and he dealt with that issue. And I now know who the devil is, Steve. He's been revealed, and he lives right between your ears. And he says, you said to me, "Do I still need to say these things out loud?" Absolutely, you have to. And it's your ego. It's your human nature. We've been redeemed. We're sons and daughters of God. So for me, I had to change the focus of my identity.
Would you describe your identity today as being different to what you might have said a couple of years ago?
Yeah. Well, no, sorry, I'll clarify that, because it's the same. I'm just more focused. My identity was, yes, I was a follower of Christ, but I'm a builder. Now, I'm still a builder, but when the rug was pulled out from under me, and I was really focusing on me not being able to build it anymore, you've got to change. You've got to really do an adjustment on who you are as an individual. And I had to focus on the fact that I'm a son of God through Christ, and that's where the riches are. And keep telling yourself, and you say that out loud. And secondly to that is, yep, I can build some stuff.
Right.
By the grace of God. But let's not get that mixed up, because you get that mixed up, it's, going to end in tears.
So at the end of the day, you look back, you had what people call a near-death experience. What's the one takeaway?
Don't let it identify you. Somebody once said, it's okay to wear a scar as long as the scar doesn't wear you. We can be identified by illness. We can be identified by our injuries. Let's be identified by being redeemed sons and daughters of God. And that's really powerful. Because, God said to the children of Israel, as he brought them out of that wilderness, he says, brought you out here so you would know hunger, so you would understand that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes out of the mouth of the Lord. He wants us to live, to develop, to prosper, to be blessed. We're going to have hard times, but he wants to do amazing things. Just focus on that and not on the alternative.
Thanks for speaking with us on Wilderness Conversations.
My pleasure.